Now we welcome in a true legend of his sport, Mr. A Funny Car Driver. He's won 75 races, 3 championships, now owns his own car, which is pretty amazing. My friend, Mr. Ron Capps, how are you, sir?
Man, I'm good. That's a hell of an introduction, especially
Eh,
from you.
Hey, I could have gone on a lot longer. It would have taken the whole segment up if I read all of your accomplishments, but yeah, pretty impressive. And you wanted to talk about, we wanted to talk about Judas Priest, of course. And I gave you 3 different songs to choose from, and you picked the one that I was really hoping you would, which is Victim of Changes, because that's such an important one and certainly goes into the title of this podcast because such an early song and such an early heavy song. When did you first hear it?
Oh my God. See, I grew up on the central coast of California, so metal for us, it took a little longer. Luckily, I had a good friend at this record store that would kind of fill me in on what was coming. And that scene in that area, obviously the big bands, everybody kind of they knew. Unleashed was probably one of the first heavy albums I'd ever heard. And I had a friend that had an older brother. We used to go to his house, and his brother was a stoner, and they would have these Pink Floyd posters and all this stuff on the wall, but he would play Unleashed, and he had these huge wooden speakers. And I just remember sitting in there, probably at a contact high at that point. We were in high school, and just listening to that album, um, you know, starting with Exciter and just rolling through and just sitting there listening to it. And that was kind of my first real kind of, I guess, foray into heavy metal. I hadn't really heard anything like that at that point. And then I became sort of a closet metalhead at that point. I was playing sports a lot and all that, but I was definitely one of the most metal guys in our high school.
Yeah, you know your stuff, so I give you credit for that. The weird thing about this song is, I grew up in LA, and I was really really lucky. There was an FM radio station, early FM radio station. It's called K West, and they played like that's where I first heard Kiss and UFO and Judas Priest. So I heard Priest pretty early on. In fact, I think it was this song actually that they played. So I got the original studio version, Sad Wings of Destiny, and I thought they had 2 singers because when you listen to that song, especially the studio one, Rob's way up high, and then he has these really low notes. Like, oh, I guess they must have 2 singers, and of course, it turned out they just had one amazing singer.
Yeah, and I didn't do as well as I probably should have in school, but it's funny how I could remember knowing KK Downing, Glenn Tipton more than I knew history that I should have been studying. Like I just that was a weird time when I look back. I still, when we were kids, you remembered phone numbers, right, before cell phones came along, and there were just certain things you remembered, and things like that always stuck out to me. I got so many pre-stories because we living in Central California. Um, we would either have to go south, to LA and Troubadour. Sometimes I think it was Arlington Theater in Santa Barbara to see some metal shows, or we'd go north. And San Luis Obispo is almost dead center between LA and the Bay Area. So I remember going to I think it was the first Dio show at a club up in the Bay Area. But my first pre-show, we stole my mom's station wagon, borrowed it, I should say now. And me and 3 buddies, we rolled it out of the driveway and we smoked it up there for a show at the Cow Palace. And so that was my childhood. It was either south or north, and we were all in middle of the week in high school. And we had to sneak off so we wouldn't get in trouble. But I just remember going to that show live and just being completely blown away. I lost my friends, and I ended up on the floor at the Cow Palace, and just in awe of watching those guys.
What tour was that?
What floor?
No, what tour was that?
Oh, that was
Or what year?
British Steel, maybe.
Okay. Oh, wow. So early on. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was pretty young. I had a couple buddies that were older. Maybe it wasn't British Steel, but anyway, I probably saw. I tell people this all the time. I bet I've seen them throughout. And before I got out of high school, I'd probably seen them 10 or 15 times. I mean, we would go anytime they were around, and we would travel throughout high school. Like I said, I had some older buddies that were really cool, and before I got my license, we would go with them, and got in a lot of trouble, got caught so many times sneaking out to go to shows, but I never really studied the lyrics of the song. It just to this day, we have Rock Band. My family and I, we play Rock Band, and I downloaded the whole catalog on Rock Band. And we've got extra guitars, and we have parties here at the house. And at the end of a UFC fight party, whatever we had, it's a Rock Band party, and my pick is always Priest. But we got somebody on drums, 2 guitars, and it turns into our own little concert. So I'm still a wannabe musician.
Nice. Yeah, I have a depressing Judas Priest story about seeing them live or not seeing them live. They were playing the Starwood in LA, which is a club. And I was just barely old enough to go, and I had a car. So I was going to every show possible that I could see at that point. Usually my mom would be cool about letting me go. But the night before that show, it was in the summertime, so it was like 1,000 degrees. And I just shut the car door, and because it's so hot, the window shattered. Like, oh no. So I was like, I don't know what to do. I couldn't get it fixed. I didn't have the money to get it fixed or a way to get it fixed. And I didn't want to drive the car to Hollywood because I was afraid if even though a piece of garbage car, I was worried that somebody would steal it. So I did not go to that show. And I've always regretted that. I just should have gone. Who cares if the car got stolen? That show is like a legendary Judas Priest show. And it was at a club, which was, right when they were starting. So bummed I missed that. So now you're a big metal fan and also a sports guy as well. Did you ever start playing instruments or want to be in a band?
I tried early in my career when I started driving for Dom Perdome. We would go out in these campgrounds throughout the country at these races. I could play just enough not to be foolish, but I would we would be having drinks and rolling around a campground with these fans, and there'd be live bands playing, and I'd get up and play a song on drums. I could hold a note just good enough and have everybody's half drunk. They thought it was awesome, but the next day at the track, they would come in, oh my God, you were awesome in that band last night. So, but I was so bummed. I never took it seriously and took it further. And it's funny because, especially driving for Dom Perdome, I mean, that's the biggest name, in drag racing, the Hot Wheels car, my idol. And then I got picked to drive for him. So being a metalhead, that was my first chance to have some sort of because I used to dream about being a big time race car driver when I was aspiring, working my way up, because I wanted to invite these people I looked up to out to a race. Because I would go to these drag races when I was a kid, and I would see these bands hanging out with these, race teams, and every guitarist and whatever wanted to be a race car driver, and every race driver wants to be playing guitar on stage in front of 200,000 people. It's funny how that works. And so I really, at that point, when I started driving for Snake, I started inviting these and reaching out, and I got to know people that were different tour managers. And so it really started getting to know the tour people on tour, all the guys that set up the stages and all. They're the ones that I would invite out to these races. And then I got to know these people I looked up to and would start to invite them out. And it's funny how I would go to a pre-show, and, almost all the guys working the show that really make it happen, some of them would have my shirt on or a drag race shirt on, or they'd see me and it was like they want to get picked, like it was a big deal. And I thought, how cool is that? There's so many, as you know, when you first came to the drag race, it's such a correlation of the same type of fans.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because there's not a lot I don't know a lot of people that grew up, playing a sport and also being a huge fan of the music. A lot of times it's one or the other. Like you're either completely into sports or I was into both. I played baseball. I wasn't good enough to really do anything after high school, but I always loved the music part of it. Of course, I can't play anything, which is why I think I'm doing what I'm doing now. It's the only way.
I feel better that I know that you've never, as much as you've been around it, you've never gotten serious about.
I have zero talent. I tried to learn guitar, couldn't do it. It was terrible. I can do a very bad 4/4 beat on the drums, and that's about it. I had just zero musical talent, so I gave up pretty early on that. But I love the music, but I couldn't. I can't play anything. Never even good enough to even try to be in a band. So I gave up that long time ago. I can't do this. My brain doesn't understand how things work. Like your fingers on a fretboard. Like, how does this work? But it doesn't work that way. So I have to do other things. But it's interesting that you had those two things, and you chose the sporting path to go down, which was probably a very good choice, by the way. That it's done so well. So where did you first decide to get into the funny car NHRA type of racing?
My dad raced when I was a kid, like on weekends. Like a lot of us, there was a drag strip outside this town in Santa Maria, California. And my dad was like the local guy that everybody took their cars to. And he had a race car for a while and then sold it. And our garage was always people with race cars, sprint cars and Can-Ams and whatever local drag racing people brought it over. So it was a cool childhood for me to grow up. And, but I always wanted to be the Snake or AJ Foyt or Mario Andretti. Race go-karts a little as a kid, but always had that, all my buddies wanted to be astronauts and all my kid friends, wanted to be baseball players. And I wanted to be a drag racer. So it's weird how it turned out, but really it started at that level, like just kind of helping my dad and hanging around. We didn't have a lot of money. So in today's world, a lot of these drivers you see in IndyCar and Formula One, especially NASCAR, especially, is these younger kids that come up, they have to bring several $1 million with them to get these rides. Most of them, 90% of them. So I didn't have that. And I figured the only way to, and I sort of tell people that aren't real hip on what's going on. It reminds me of was it called Rockstar, the movie that?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. It was like that. So I learned how to work on them. I was a crew guy, but I had this hidden passion to drive. And it wasn't until a guy that I met who had a dragster already had another dragster, and I had a conversation with him one day at the track. And he, the next day, said, "Hey, I enjoyed talking to you. How'd you like to get your license in my dragster?" And he had one in Montana. I hopped on a plane, picked it up. And the fact that all those years I worked on it, it was like I was a roadie, basically, working on these dragsters. And the first time I got in it, I felt like I'd done it already. And so I did real well. He got rid of his other driver, and that was my first ride. And then my career just boom, boom, boom. Next thing I know, I got a phone call from the Snake calling me to hire him, which just doesn't happen normally, right? And so that was sort of my in a nutshell, my career.
It's crazy. I was a huge fan of the Snake when I was a kid. I used to love watching him race, all the battles he had with so many famous people. But I've asked you this before, but I have to ask you, what on earth is it like to go 300 miles an hour? That's just insane.
It is, it's like the world's flying apart for 3.8 seconds, and it's 0 to 100 in less than 1 second from a standing stop. So it's more G-forces than the space shuttle pilots go through. When I hit the parachutes at the finish line, it's -9 Gs. So it's, you've seen it live. I'm sure a lot of people watching this have seen a drag race or been to one in the past. It's just, I tell people it's like time travel for 3.8 seconds, and everything but exactly where I'm pinpoint looking at the finish line is a complete blur. And you don't get to enjoy the run. Once the chutes come out and you start slowing down, then you can enjoy what just happened. But during the run, I'm hanging on for dear life to keep that thing straight, not blow it up. It's a lot going on in a little packed amount of time.
Now, do you get an adrenaline rush doing this, or are you just so focused on not messing anything up that you can't let that happen?
Both. And here's the funny thing. So my love for music, I'm rock and roll and heavy metal. I talked to all these guitarists who I looked up for years or whatever instrument they play. And I always wonder, like, if you go out in front of this huge crowd and you've played it a million times and you start to play and something messes up, because the same thing in the race car, you prepare for this moment and things start. And what if it doesn't go right? Which normally in our race cars, most of the time, they don't go exactly right. You're just trying to do your best. So yeah, the adrenaline level is out of the roof. So people watch on TV, when I get out to do an interview, I just drove less than a quarter of a mile, yet I get out and I'm winded and you'd think I ran it on foot. So the adrenaline is crazy. You're strapped in by 12 straps. You put through these G-forces that are more than most anything on planet Earth. And then they stick a microphone in your face. So it's a lot going on in a little amount of time.
Yeah, it's it's funny you mentioned the fact, when bands go up and something goes wrong, and it's even these guys that have done it for years and years and years and played tons of big shows. When something goes wrong on stage, you look the look of fright and panic in their face is pretty amazing. I'll never forget, I was watching Iron Maiden in Chicago, Illinois, actually. And it's kind of a funny story because I've my favorite song of all time is "Hallowed Be Thy Name" by Iron Maiden. Greatest song ever written, if you ask me. It's my opinion. So they're playing that song, and the unfortunate thing for me is that Adrian Smith is on stage, who played the amazing solo on the record, but he's not doing it live anymore. So Yannick is doing it, which whatever. But Yannick, his guitar was out like right at the beginning of the song. So he's kind of looking around, panicking, like, what happened. So he goes back. They have these little curtains. He goes back behind the curtain, and they're playing the song, and I'm watching Adrian Smith, and I'm going, hey, I think Adrian's going to play the solo to my friends. I'm like, this is going to be amazing. But the look of terror on his face, because he hadn't played that solo in who knows how long. And I'm imagining it's probably not a solo he loved. Otherwise, I'm sure he'd be playing it. But there's the look of sheer and he kept looking over to see if Yannick was going to come back out, and he never did. So I had to kind of do something to walk through the solo. But again, you'd think these guys have played, thousands of shows and be like, whatever. It's a mistake. It's going to happen. But yeah, it's that look of terror is crazy. Now,
Yeah.
being a music fan and being in a popular sport, you get to meet a lot of your heroes. Like, tell me some of the best stories about some of the people you met that were cooler than you thought they'd be, maybe.
Oh my God. Well, Nico, you and I
Yep.
were backstage there when he was still with Iron Maiden. He's always been great. He comes out and fans love him. Everybody knows him. He's got his old school weightlifter jammy pants on. He wears everywhere, and he wears them to the starting line, which is awesome. Oh man, one of the funny stories. So my best friend in high school was a DJ on a local station in San Luis Obispo, not a rock station, not a hard rock, but right when we got out of high school, he got a job at KNAC. His name's Darren Silva. He became Dangerous Darren, who
Yep.
you probably know very well. Now he's on
Yep.
Sirius. So
Yep.
best friend growing up, still one of my best friends. And it's funny, throughout the country, I'll be at a race and fans will come up and go, man, I was listening to Dangerous Darren the other night. He was telling a story of you two on one of our crazy trips, because him and I used to be one of the ones that would take off and steal mom's car and head to, down south or up north to see a band play. But one of the funniest things, that you'll appreciate this, which also I didn't even realize this, one of the only metal shows where I grew up, San Luis Obispo area, that was sort of a big deal back then. It was like, I think I just got out of high school. It was like 84-ish, was Slayer came to this little theater in Pismo Beach, Central Coast Theater. And I'll never forget, it was Bitch in Trouble open for Slayer on this tour, but they were at this little, if you knew this, and you might know it, you might have been there now that I think about it, but this little movie theater, who we grew up going to movies at this place, and it's still there, by the way. But to go to that place that night and have it be in our backyard was like the craziest thing ever in that area. Because nothing, we had a little band called Intrinsic, was a local band, a guy named Ed Sandor from San Luis, Moto Grader, a good friend of my brother and I, Matt Nunez, guitar player in that band. They're sort of the only really thing that came out of that area, metal. So it was a huge deal to have that show right there in Pismo Beach. Never forget it. But when I started driving for Snake, I knew that James Hetfield, and this is 1997. So I knew James Hetfield was a car guy, right? Big Metallica fan. And back then, this is before cell phones. I know a lot of your people watching this are going to not remember this or weren't old enough. But, you and I, especially back in the day, you would look at these record sleeves and you would read about, the songs and what it meaning was, but you'd read the fan information and you'd always wonder, like, here's a date or an address they would put of where the band was from. You always wondered, is it a studio? What was it, right back in the day? So I was like, I remember we had a race in Sonoma. I knew the whole band was the Bay Area. I knew James was from there. And so I just remember I found somehow before the internet, I found a number to an agency in New York that handled Metallica, and I called it. the lady wouldn't even give me the time of day. I just said, hey, I want to talk to somebody about Metallica. I want to invite James Hetfield out to my race. And this is like my first professional race up in Sonoma, California. But there was a fax number that I saw somewhere on something that I read. So I sent this fax and I hand wrote it at the house, went down to Kinko's, if you remember those places, and I hand wrote this note to James Hetfield, or I wrote to the handler of James, whatever I wrote. I'd love to invite James out to our drag race. I know he's a big car guy and I know he'd appreciate it. NHRA race, Sonoma, California. Here's my phone number. And it was our home number. I go down, I fax it to Kinko's thinking nothing's going to ever happen to this. Wasn't even sure it went through to anybody, right? Big New York agency. And I get home and the phone rings and my wife picks it up and she goes, it's James Hetfield. And I was like, what? He called the house. That's the number I put down. And he's like, hey, man, I'd love to go to the race this weekend. And I was just like, holy shit. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll get you tickets. We swap information. There was a lady that handled him, might still in San Francisco from some company there that handled them. And he came out to the race. And that's the first time I got to be friends with James. He ended up coming to a few more shows or a few more races. And then we would go to shows. And it's funny when I tell people that, because they're like, oh my God, how do you get to be friends with James Hetfield? Because we go to Hawaii and we meet up. And I said, you wouldn't even believe it. It wasn't like I had my PR person contact his people. That was legit how it happened. And I'll never forget that phone call. And then hanging up and just looking at my wife like, that was James Hetfield, and he's coming to the race this weekend. So that's probably the craziest, rock and roll story for me.
That's awesome. I love that. And he's such a great guy that none of that surprises me at all. And yeah, he is a huge car guy. And that's, my thing too is, I love it when my two worlds collide. Like I'm a big sports fan, especially, hockey and, racing. I mean, just, everything. And it's just funny to have I'm able to go to some of these places and, say hi to guys like you and go to the races, which is just super fun for me. And, I get to look behind the scenes just because, again, you're in the music business. It goes both ways. I'll never forget Lars when Metallica first played the Forum in LA in the 80s. And Lars was in the dressing room, the King's dressing room, and he had on Wayne Gretzky's helmet. I got Wayne Gretzky's helmet on. It's just you're so excited about it. It's funny how those, like you said, the musicians want to be athletes and the athletes want to be musicians. So it goes hand in hand like that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you used to go to either north or south to go to shows. Did you have any preference on which ones you went to or which ones you like to go to?
Man, that's a great question. Y&T is one of the bands I probably saw more than any of them.
Yep.
They played a lot of small venues, Arlington Theater. We'd go to the Bay Area. Boy, it didn't matter. I mean, we'd go to Warfield, we'd go to Troubadour or Roxy. I mean, it was, I probably saw more shows at the old, and I say the old, I don't even know if it's around anymore, but up in the Bay Area. I remember seeing Ozzy when I think Axe opened up for him.
Oh, wow.
And the guitarist played both bands. What was his name?
I got to forget now too.
Remember Axe had Rock and Roll Party in the Street was like their one big song, but I don't know how far after it was the Randy Rhoads thing, but he played that show.
Not Brad Gillis.
Yeah, I think it was Brad Gillis.
Brad, he's a great guy too, by the way.
Yeah. Probably Bay Area. Probably was better. Slims, Warfield,
Stone.
Yeah. Just great small venues. It's probably for me. Memories.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of San Francisco, the city, but I do love all the venues up there. I used to go up there all the time because it was, there was a little more of a heavier scene than we had in LA, although we had a pretty heavy scene in LA. And yeah, you mentioned Y&T, or as they were originally called Yesterday Today. I saw them opening for Boston, like the second or third show I ever went to. I think it was the third show. And I had no idea who they were. Their record was coming out that week, and they blew Boston off the stage. So I became a huge fan. And they used to come down every couple months and play the Starwood, and just it was amazing. What a tremendously legendary band. And if you guys are not familiar with them, please go check it out. There's also a great documentary that you can get online or on, I think it's on Prime or one of those things. It's really cool. So back to Priest. Did you ever get to meet those guys at all, or just the crew guys?
Got to meet them later in life, when I kind of became bigger and where I was at. A good friend of mine, Kevin, worked for the band. He wasn't a tour manager, but he bounced around different bands. I still call him when I want to go to certain shows. I'll call him and he'll set me up with other bands. He was a huge and still is a huge drag race fan. So I got to meet everybody in the band.
Nice.
At that time, which was unbelievable. Rob, that's one of those guys you're like, he's as cool as you were hope when you meet him, just in awe. So yeah, and it's probably, like I said, it's probably the band I saw the most of anybody. And a lot of great memories. But I've gotten very lucky to have so many people I've invited out and gotten to see shows like that, like you were talking about, that have really kind of, engraved in my mind. And you have those ones that aren't necessarily the greatest. When you meet them, you're like, well, that was kind of lackluster. But most of them, for me, the tour managers who I've gotten to know, Scotty Ross, who was a guy that bounced around, ironically, he was the one that got me the number to Dave Menichetti to invite him and his wife out to our Sonoma race, years later, who was tour manager of Montrose. And when I said, hey, I don't know if you know this band, it's one of my favorites, I'd like to invite him to Sonoma, it's YNT. And he goes, I was their first tour manager. So, I mean, I met him with Van Halen when I met Scotty the first time, and just a great guy. But he's the one that called. And so I always have these few, like you, that you can call and you can pretty much go to any show, which, by the way, I always thought the side of the stage and backstage, it's the coolest thing ever, right? Your friends know you're back there, and it's always the coolest thing. What really turned me on about going to I think it was a Maiden show. I don't know how many shows I've been where you were at, but I always thought it was cool that you go find the best sounding place. Like, you don't care, you do your thing backstage, but then I find out you're like in the best sounding place no matter what. Like, it could be the cheapest paid seat, but I always admire that. Like, you go out and you want to watch a show and you want to watch it and hear it and enjoy it, which is crazy. And most people should do that. But I'm always been stuck on this thing. Hey, I'm on the side of the stage, there's pictures. And that really changed my mind when I saw you do that the first time.
Good. Yeah, I hate the side of the stage. It's really bad now because, everybody's got in-ears, so you can't really hear anything. And even back in the days when there were just monitors and stuff, I just never liked it because you couldn't hear anything, you couldn't really see the show. I mean, I'm a fan. I went to a million shows. I want to be where the fans are and get the experience that we see. I mean, it's cool. It's like hockey. It's fun every once in a while to sit on the glass because of the speed of the game, but you can't really see anything. You're going to be back 30, 40 rows up. So it's the same thing with concerts. I want to be in the crowd and, try, like you said, try to find the best sounding spot and best spot to watch the show. But it's always super fun to do that. Now, back to this song in particular. So you mentioned that the first time you heard it was on the live album. You obviously you went back to the studio version. Do you have a favorite between the two of them?
Unleashing the East is still, to me, it's the Frampton Comes Alive. For me, and I don't know how they pulled it off. If it was just smaller channels that they recorded it, that it was that clean. But it's still one of the most amazing albums that you still get quality sound from. So I know I probably pissed a lot of people off saying that, but Unleashed to me is still one of the most unbelievable records to sit and listen to, even from a sound point, even though I have this memory of it. Like I was telling you, a bunch of older stoner buddies of my buddy and his brother, I still have these memories and I still can sit and listen to that anywhere. And it still sounds amazing.
Yeah, and I think, back, so many live albums are, as we know, not really live. Most of them are not live. I do think, though, that most of that was live, but I think the reason that it sounds so good is we're recorded in Japan, and Japan, technology-wise, has always been way ahead of the game on everything. So I know that they had some amazing stuff to record that there. And I think that's one of the reasons why. I'm trying to remember the exact story of that album. I think they didn't mean to record a live album, but I think they did it in Japan partially because, number one, they had a big fan base there. Number two, the technology was really great there, so they knew they'd get something really good out of the recordings. So yeah, it's a legendary record for sure.
You always hear these stories, the bands that they're in their contract, they got to put something out, so they'll thrash together and record a live show, right? I always love hearing those stories, and usually, like you said, they don't sound the greatest; they just sound like a live show. And yeah, so that still to me is one of the greatest sounding albums, and just the lineup as it rolls into Green Man, Alicia, and I just, and I didn't even know that was a remake until way later. It was like Fleetwood Mac. I was like, that's a weird remake that Fleetwood Mac's doing of Judas Priest, but
right.
Yeah.
Priest was good about that, and they would do stuff that you wouldn't really know, like Diamonds and Rust, with Joan Baez on
Yeah.
What is Judas Priest doing that for? But they do an amazing version of it. It also captures that band, like really kind of in their, their prime would probably be a little bit after that, after Screaming and everything. But I love that time frame of Priest because, they weren't really big yet, so they're still kind of had that edge to it, and that live album is just like a blur from beginning to end.
Yeah, and I didn't, back to reading the lyrics and reading the sleeve, and I always wondered if the song was about this guy heartbroken and she changed, or I always thought it was like her drinking and she went, but when I talked to you the first time, I went back and started reading up on a bunch of stuff, and it seems to have a couple different meanings, and you always wonder. I love hearing these stories how people came about writing songs and what they really mean. Because when I was younger, you'd listen to it and you'd have perception, and MTV kind of ruined a lot of it with videos of those bands. And you're like, is that for real? Then you hear later on, you're like, no, that's what the director of the video wanted to do. But you hear the bands talk about it. I love hearing all that stuff. Which I went back to some of your shows and I was real jealous, and I don't know who it was, but the one guy that picked Swords and Tequila by Riot. Because when you asked me, I was like, oh, it was one of my favorite bands growing up. That was a great show.
Yeah, Brian Koppelman, who he's the show director and creator of Billions and Ocean's 13 and Rounders. He's a big time Hollywood guy, but he also was a music industry guy as well. He was A&R for a couple of major labels and worked with Metallica.
Didn't know that.
Yeah,
crazy.
He's always been a huge metal fan, and especially of that record. So, I'm glad he did that, and I'm glad you like that too, because that's one of the ones that probably of all these episodes I've done, the one that probably people know the least amount about. Like, who? Riot? What is that? What is this record? It's such a brilliant, amazing record. I'm happy that you like it as well.
Yeah,
I was very good taste.
Fast Way as well. One of my favorite albums. Just but it was cool that to hear him. I actually Googled him because I was like, who is this guy? And I couldn't believe it was that guy talking about Riot and then all his stuff in his music background.
Well, see, as you know, people in all sorts of different walks of life love metal. So he was definitely one of them. I've been friends with him for a long, long time. Super good guy. And it's funny when he actually emailed me and said, hey, I love the show. If you ever want to do an episode about Riot, Swords and Tequila, let me know. I'm your guy. And I literally had a list, and that's on there, of course. And I was going to get him because he's like, him and 80 Trunk are the two biggest fans that I know of that record. So I'll include you now as the third in there too, which is awesome.
It's a good company.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, dude, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. Great seeing you. Great talking metal with you, and continue good luck. Hopefully you win another couple championships here in the next few years and keep all that stuff going.
Yeah, we'll be back in Vegas end of October. So if you're around, I will text you like usual and let you know. And
it's in my calendar.
Always, any of your friends want to come to any of our races, that's what I love the most. And you and I were introduced by a good friend, NHRA. And I love the introduction on both sides. And I love turning people on to what we do, as well as going to watch what you love. So thank you for having me, man. Huge fan, always been a huge fan. And it's an honor to be on here.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Oh, you can't leave yet, though, because we have to upload it. So you have to wait a minute.